What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. It's here, Larry.
It's
Week
here.
one.
I can't wait. I'm shaking in my boots, like in a good way. It's nuts. I'm excited.
And Rutgers is the first game of the Big Ten season, and so it's very appropriate that you are my guest here on week one. So thanks for joining us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, Rutgers, I'm not even sure. I think this was like a late schedule change, but it reminds me of these old Big East days in Schiano's first tenure where we would have these Thursday night games and it was like, prime time and everybody's watching. So not that everybody's watching us against Howard this week, but I will be, Rutgers Nation will be, and it's kind of cool to set off, the second kind of week of college football. August flew by, but hey.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's tomorrow. Well, today this is posting today as in August 29th. So tonight, as the listeners and viewers are watching and listening, you get college football, you get Rutgers, Howard, UNC, Minnesota, and Illinois, Eastern Illinois tonight. Good slate of games for a Thursday night. So it'll be fun. We're going to go over all 18 games. If you guys like the show, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, like and subscribe. Trying to get to 300 subscribers by the end of the week. So make sure you do that. Also, make sure you hit up Larry at Night Watch. That channel is growing. One of the best places to get Rutgers info. And of course, make sure to catch us at the College Huddle as well. But we're going to jump into this. It's 10:27 p.m. right now. And we both need to go to bed. So we're going to try to fly through this a little bit. But Larry, we're going to start with your Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Before we talk about the game, Mohamed Toure, big time linebacker for you guys, tore his ACL. Second time I believe he's done that. Huge blow. Feels so bad for the kid. Could you just talk real quickly about the impact of that injury?
So, he's the sack leader last year. He's somebody who suffered an injury only 2 years ago, comes back last year and is really one of the most pivotal, impactful players on the field for our defense. I was over on the OHIO podcast recently, and some of the guys were saying they had Toure up there as like the number 3 linebacker in the Big Ten. He certainly was on top of many people's lists, conference-wide, nationwide, and clearly for Rutgers. It's a serious blow because he was also a team captain. He's somebody who was an emotional leader, and they fed off of his energy. He really encapsulated what it was to be chopped, that culture Schiano's always pushing. And it's tough to lose a player like that from an X's and O's standpoint, but also from a, emotional standpoint. Players like that, there's no getting around it. Rutgers has expectations this year. The defense has expectations, and that kind of player, whether, it's a consistent, traditional linebacker or whether he's a hybrid, which he was, moving from linebacker to getting on the line on third downs, rushing the passer, guys like that, ball players change games. And in a season that I think Rutgers is going to have a lot of toss-ups, a lot of parity on the football field, it hurts to lose a guy who changes games with plays. That being said, Rutgers has some significant depth at linebacker. It's going to be tested because Tyreen Powell is coming back from an injury now. I don't know. I don't think you'll see him, to be honestly, tomorrow or tonight. I don't think you'll see him for the first game or two, and then we have a bye week. I think the earliest you're going to see him is VTech. I could be wrong, but the depth is going to be tested, but there is depth there. Jabome is a kid from Canada who the staff is very high on. He's somebody who they think could be the next great linebacker at Rutgers. So he's going to step into that role. Moses Walker, highly touted 4-star recruit from New York, actually was down to Penn State and us, came to Rutgers. Highly, big expectations for him. So those guys are going to be tested. This team is going to be tested. You start off with an injury. You don't like to see it. That's football, though. It hurts. It stings. Good news is we're going to have him back for next year, most likely, unless he decides to go to the league, where next year we might be kind of thin on defense with a bunch of guys expected to move on. So that's kind of the long and short of it. It's not fun. And we're just going to try to cope.
Yeah. This might be a tough question. Like, how many games, does he, do you think that this is going to cause a change in the win-loss projection, losing Toure?
It 100% could. You could see, look, It might not if guys are firing on all cylinders, which is what you hope, what you preach if you're talking about Chop. Well, if he's out, well, who else on defense is going to step up maybe in a different way? What committee of guys are going to step up? And is the offense going to compensate? But, it could be up to 2 games that it costs in the win-loss column, to be honest. If you have a pivotal game and you're talking about a sack on 3rd down that kills a drive or a fumble or something, it could be 2 games. Now, you hope it's no games. And I think realistically, if we're settling on averages here, it could be a game. You could have a tight game where if you see a quarterback, hold the ball for a while, scramble and make a throw that keeps a drive alive and we lose that game, I think you point to that game and you say, you can never definitively say, but I bet you if Teray was there, maybe he would have made an impact. We'll never know, but I think it certainly is substantial enough to impact the win-loss record. Hopefully at the end of the day, we're in a place where the season was successful enough we don't think about it. But if the season's not, or there was a close game that could have meant a big difference in legacy of the season, I think you're going to see a little bit of discussion. But who knows who else goes down, who else steps up. So say Jabome comes in and kills it, well, then I think even if we do lose, you're not just blaming that. So we'll see.
Well, speedy recovery, prayers for Teray. Great player, great kid. You guys aren't going to need him for Howard.
No.
No. So we'll get into the games here. And, we talked about this off air. Some of these games, and those of you who are listening, I know there's probably 1 or 2 of you, Yankee Wolverine, my guy. You probably want a 15-minute expose on Rutgers Howard. We're not giving that to you. I'm sorry. That's just not happening. We're just going to say, are they going to cover or not? There will be some where we'll get into some more analysis. But listen, there's 18 games, guys. 18.
Yeah.
It was already rough when it was 14. Now we got 18 and it's rough. But yeah, so Howard Rutgers, this is at 6 p.m. on the Big Ten Network Thursday tonight. Rutgers is a 36.5-point favorite. And for a reference point, Howard lost to Harvard a year ago, 48-7.
That's brutal.
So here's my question. Does Rutgers cover?
I think you're going to see Rutgers cover. I don't think you're going to see them go above and beyond. I do think you're going to be, if you're betting that, which, that's up to whatever your poison is, you want to do something like that. I think you might be biting your nails a little bit going into the 4th quarter because, quite frankly, 2 things. Howard is expected to be, a formidable team in their conference this year, maybe a little better than last year. Doesn't, I don't think, have much impact on the game per se, other than the fact that Rutgers, from what I understand, has a couple injuries that they haven't disclosed to us, not season ending, but I think you're going to see some newer guys in newer roles for the first couple games. And I think that's a dual thing. Number one, you're not going to have this well-oiled machine because first game, it is what it is. You've played scrimmages in the spring game. You haven't played games like this. So you're going to have some rust. And then if you have guys not playing, and then you have guys trying to, Shiano likes to work out some things in the first couple games, try some things, tries to go vanilla, even though he denies it. He tries to keep it vanilla. He doesn't want to show his hand, so you're going to, I think, struggle to get going a little bit. I don't think struggle, but, you're not going to get going maybe is the way you would love to. And I think you're going to see guys pulled because I think if they've already had somewhat of the injury bug, some dings and bumps, I think you're not going to risk it. So you're going to see guys put some points on the board, work out some kinks, and then I think you're going to see guys who aren't starters climb into the game. And that leaves an opening for Howard to put some points on the board, and that leaves an opening for us to go, without scoring a touchdown every drive. So I think we cover, but I don't think, it's going to be some insane, blowout where you're sitting back relaxing if you bet, on the spread. So I do think we cover, though. I mean, we know what's up.
Yeah, I think there's the potential for like the backdoor, like Howard to make it look closer than it was. So like I could see like a 45-13 score where Howard scores late and anyone who bets the game is angry. But like I think part of like Vegas lines are helpful. I'm not a betting guy.
Me either.
I just find Vegas lines helpful for context.
Yes.
But I think if you're thinking, like Rutgers didn't cover, I still think it's a blowout. Like I think Rutgers is going to handle their business.
Yeah.
It's just I could see it being like a 32-point win instead of a 39-point win.
100%. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's well within the realm of possibility. Yes.
Yeah. So we got Rutgers big. We'll move on. We'll do Minnesota, North Carolina in a minute, but we'll do Illinois, Eastern Illinois at Illinois, 9 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. This is a 28-point spread for Illinois. Do you think Illinois is going to cover that, or do you have some concerns about Illinois in this game?
I think I have concerns about Illinois season long. I mean, I don't think that they're necessarily going to be one of the top teams in the conference, but I mean, Eastern Illinois, it's a significant spread. I don't have any worries about Illinois winning the game. I don't have any worries about Illinois winning the game decisively. I'm not as familiar with the in-state rivalry and how much that might play into it. Yeah. I mean, and you've seen it before, but it's more like Rutgers NJIT than Rutgers Seton Hall. I mean, it's not. Yeah. I think I expect them to easily win. They'll be right around that coverage mark too, I think. I mean, I don't have a huge concern with this game with them. It's the kind of game they want to start with and try to get rolling.
Yeah. I think it's going to be important for them to be able to run the ball, especially with Kansas coming up. Like they got to run. But I think I'm with you. I think Illinois covers. That's a big spread though for a team that struggled at times a year ago.
It is.
This one is going to be fun. Mm-hmm. And UNC Minnesota, 8 p.m. Fox. I think we get Gus and Joel. So it's a big game. This spread has fluctuated. Mm-hmm. USC -2. There's some thoughts that maybe Darius Taylor and maybe even Daniel Jackson might be out of this game or at least hobbled a bit. What's your take on this game? This is a big one.
It is a big one. And I think this is only their third meeting ever, if I understand correctly. And they split the first two, like over like 84 and 70 something. And that's been it. Pretty interesting. I think it's kind of the tale of quarterbacks that are no longer there, and I think it's going to be a close game. USC wants to get off on the right foot, There's kind of, and I've heard this a lot, it's really remains to be seen how strong they're going to be in the conference this year because we don't have a lot of frame of reference. And both of these teams obviously have a gauntlet to get through. So
you're talking about North Carolina?
Oh no, what are we talking about? US? I thought we were on USC LSU for some reason.
Sorry, I said UNC.
Oh, see how
you're going to Sunday.
Yeah, see what's happening when it's late. Because I think you sent me that in the Instagram that we were going to talk about that. So when you said UNC, I think I heard USC. I'm going to LSU USC.
We'll get to the Vegas game.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry about that.
So UNC.
Yeah, and Minnesota. UNC and
totally
Minnesota.
Different game. Look, Minnesota's got some problems. They had problems last year. I think the coach is on the hot seat. Fleck wants to be a defensive-minded coach, and he wants to do his thing in that regard, and he kind of has fallen out flat a little bit. And he's gotten them to certain heights that I think people were excited about. And then last year, and as of recent, he's struggled. UNC, they have some expectations this year in the ACC. Mm-hmm. Last year, the receivers went off in that game. I like UNC in that game. I like UNC in that game. Spread. What was the spread again on the game?
It's -2. -2. UNC.
I like UNC straight up. I mean, -2. It's kind of It's a close game, and that's pretty much it. They didn't they beat the brakes off the Gophers last season?
Yeah, it was 31-13, but the score wasn't as close as the score.
They're not going to have Drake May throwing the ball. So it's a little bit different in that regard. But they still have playmakers, and I think Minnesota's kind of they're going to want to show up. They're going to want to set the tone for this season. They're going to want to exert, show themselves defensively, and kind of make up for some of the bad karma, or not karma, but bad, vibes or whatever from last year. I don't think it's going to be a great season for Minnesota, quite frankly. I think UNC I think they're still going to have guys in the perimeter making plays, and I don't expect Minnesota to really be able to stop them that much. And I think we're going to see a closer game than last year, but I think UNC still comes out on top.
So I'm high on Minnesota this year.
Interesting.
I think a big part of it, I think Max Brosmer coming in fits what they want to do more than Kaliakmanis did. I what concerns me for UNC, they replace almost their entire offensive line.
Yes.
Max Johnson is kind of a journeyman quarterback, and then the other guy that's kind of his backup, or they might both play.
Right.
But like they're not Drake May.
Right.
And
not at all.
And there's like, if you look at Minnesota, they have, I think, 8 starters back on defense, and they're really high on Ja Joyner at rush end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's certainly opportunity for UNC. I mean, there's a reason why it's a close spread. And I think my feel on this game is actually, it's a little similar to the Virginia Tech Rutgers game later on. Although I picked it early in the season, but I want to repick that week. But I think Virginia Tech, got the doors blown off by Rutgers, but I think they got better and improved. I think Minnesota, particularly with the transfer portal, got a lot better.
Right.
And my biggest concern right now with Minnesota is, does Daniel Jackson and Darius Taylor play?
Right.
Because I think Taylor is a special back.
Mm-hmm.
They have a really good offensive line, like Ariante Ursary, that's his last name. Like, gonna be a top 3 round pick, I think. Like, really good left tackle. If Daniel Jackson and Darius Taylor don't play, I think it's a dogfight, and I think UNC probably comes out on top. I've got it 26-17 Minnesota if they both play.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, 27-16. Because I think North Carolina is going to struggle to score touchdowns because of the quarterback. Like, I think they'll drive the ball. I think they'll get big plays.
Right.
I just don't know if they're going to get to the end zone a lot.
Yeah, it could be a different situation, and they're losing some guys. The quarterback's a huge difference. So when you don't have that kind of signal caller, your whole team's going to change. So that goes a long way. I think Minnesota traveling too might have something to do with it. It's not like west to east, but it's Midwest to east, and I don't know that UNC is notorious for their football crowds, but
Yeah. Well, it's at Minnesota.
It's at
Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm lost. Yeah. So it's at Minnesota.
I don't think I set you up well for that.
No, I didn't know. I don't know why I thought it was in UNC.
Yeah.
That changes my perspective a bit on it too, quite frankly.
How so?
So I just think when you're going up against a newer quarterback, you lose your signal caller from last year. You're trying to emphasize defense. You're trying to emphasize your running game. We know the style of play Fleck likes to have. We know the style of play Minnesota wants to have. And now you're a playmaking team in UNC. That's how you relied. That's how you beat them last year through the air. And now you're on the road against a defensive team who wants to start off on the right foot. And you are now finding yourselves. And maybe we'll see a different UNC team by the end of the year, like with some of these other teams you mentioned, VTech last year, where you're going to find your footing later. But if it's the first game and it's on the road, I don't necessarily know that it changes my prediction fully as to who's going to win. But I don't expect UNC to kind of have the tone the way I thought they would if they would be at home.
Yeah. It's a good opener.
It is. No, there's some games that are good games. Like, they're not just, lining up to knock them down games. And that's a good one. I mean, for both teams and where they want to go, a barometer for does Minnesota regain their footing this year, and a barometer for can UNC kind of pick up where they left off to some extent and kind of rebuild and reload here. So an interesting game one way or the other. The fact that maybe that's why I thought it too, that UNC had that slight edge. But I guess even on the road, they have that slight edge. Is that UNC's favorite? Or?
Yeah, UNC's the favorite.
So
I think the potential injuries
that makes sense,
because that line swung. It was like a 1.5 point line in favor of Minnesota, and then it's moved all the way to 2 on the other side. So that I think again, like if Taylor and Jackson are not there, like I think Minnesota has a good stable of backs. I just think without Taylor, that really changes the game for me because I think part of what I think Minnesota's pathway to victory is running the ball and sustaining drives and then letting Brosmer go off play action. But if they can't sustain drives, I could see a scenario where UNC gets enough opportunities to go bombs away.
And that's
And
what I'm worried, right? Because just the differences in those teams and how they play. If you don't sustain drives, there's still a big play opportunity, and that's what beat them last year. I get it. May's not
yeah,
there, but still, it's just
yeah,
I'm interested to see it. But I do think being on the road for UNC hurts them a little, and being at home for Minnesota should give them a boost. So
yeah. Another interesting game. We'll go to Friday. Florida Atlantic goes to Michigan State.
Mhm.
This is at 7 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Michigan State's a 14-point favorite. Any danger for Michigan State here?
They're not that much of a favorite. I think there could be danger for them. They are now look they reloaded in some ways in the transfer portal too.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a rough year last year in a lot of ways, and kind of a downward spiral for that program after a lot of fanfare early on. A couple of years ago with them, and I remember Rutgers beat them in 2020, and then they kind of went on a little bit of a tear, and they looked like they were on the rise. Last year was kind of a
Mm-hmm.
downward spiral. Um, there's danger. It's not like Florida Atlantic were world beaters last year, um, but there's always a danger, I think, when you're a new team like that, finding your footing with a bunch of new faces, trying to
Mm-hmm.
establish your identity, and you have a hungry team coming in that wants to come at you. Tom Herman's there at FAU.
Yep.
I wouldn't ever really put anything past him to try to be, innovative and hit somebody in the mouth, especially a team that's finding its footing. Um, what were they, 4-8 last year?
Yeah, 4-8. Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't go off of last year necessarily, but I don't know that. I think it's hard to look at because you got a lot of transfers, even with FAU.
Yeah.
They're gonna try to sling the ball around. And these teams are kind of largely unknown to me because if you have all these new transfers coming in the passing game for FAU was 4-8. Got a bunch of new faces with Michigan State. I would think
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State's going to be the stronger team overall this season, just because of the
Yep.
conference disparity, because of what Michigan State went out and got. I think Michigan State's kind of going to be a middling team in some ways this year. I think they might hover around 500, and so I think they're going to beat FAU, but I wouldn't be surprised to see FAU go in there and light it up a bit. And I wouldn't be surprised to see FAU get off to a fast start, just
Yeah.
given the way they want to attack you, and given the fact that Michigan State's going to still be trying to find their footing after really kind of tearing it all apart last year and rebuilding it so much through the transfer portal. I wouldn't be surprised to see FAU jump out to a start. I think Michigan State finds its footing down the stretch, and I think they win the game. Spread, I don't know. I think it'll be a closer game than Michigan State's going to want, but
Yeah.
I think they take care of business at the end.
Yeah. I think Jonathan Smith is the right guy for this job. And he's used to being at a program with low expectations. Not
Right.
that not that Michigan State historically has low expectations, but I like he was at Oregon State and built them into a contender a year ago. And it took him a while, but I think the one thing that'll keep them from covering in my mind is if Aiden Childs turns the ball over and
Right.
takes the backbreaking sacks. And I just don't think that's going to be what happens early. I think they're going to put him in safe positions.
Yes.
I think Michigan State's defense, Mitch, not is it? No, Joe Rossi, who came over from Minnesota. I think he's probably patched that defense up enough to kind of at least keep that defense from giving up too many big plays. So I think they might cover. I don't think they're on upset alert for me, but I think I think it could get dicey in the first half, and it might be like, oh no, not this again.
Yeah,
But
because they're going to come out slinging, and look, but
yeah,
you can give up a play or two to
yeah,
an FAU if you can button up and start overpowering them at some point, which I expect, and tighten up a little bit and get smart. I don't think they're going to run away with it, but I could see some big plays and some people kind of turning heads early that game, saying, "Oh, what's going on with that score?" Maybe a 14-3 and we've all been there with the teams. You got to find your foot, but I don't think it's going to be in doubt for very long. I
yep, agreed. Uh, Wisconsin hosts Western Michigan 9 p.m. on FS1. So this is in Camp Randall. Wisconsin a 23.5-point favorite. Real quick, you think they cover?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's a tee up game. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
they do.
yeah.
That's a coronation of Wisconsin at 9. Bet, come out there and have fun. Put your cheese on your head. I know you don't do that for them, but maybe you do when you just, yeah, it's not. It's they put cheese on their head for a lot of things, not just Packer games. Okay.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Not knocking them in any way. I think it's going to be fun for Wisconsin fans, for the Badgers.
Yeah.
Badgers are going to have fun that night. No need to say much more, I don't think.
Yeah. Van Dyke, I think they're going to try to get Van Dyke a lot of run in the pass game.
Get them warmed up. Yeah.
3:30 on Saturday. Akron goes to number 2 Ohio State. I'm actually going to this game with my son.
Nice.
Ohio State, the line is 48.5.
That's a heck of a lot. I mean, doesn't mean they're not going to handily destroy Akron.
Yeah.
Those spreads are so weird to me always, because like, how much is Ohio State on the gas? How much are you guys playing your, starters throughout the game? I could see them covering. I could also see them a little bit short of it just because it's so huge.
Yeah, it could be like 63-17 and not cover.
Right. I mean, I don't know. Like, then you don't want to hurt yourself. I'm not ever accusing anybody of like laying off the pedal, but like, that's a big spread. You get into the fourth quarter and like, at what point do you kind of take your foot off the pedal a little? I don't know. I think that can go either way. I mean, Ohio State's going to handily win. It's going to be fun for you and your son. I don't know about that insane spread.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they can. It's just like, I can't even really fathom it to figure it out. Like, it's very possible they do, and very possible they're like 4 points short of it.
Yeah. The only reason why I feel confident that they will, I totally agree with you. I think we're going to see a couple pick sixes in this game,
right?
Like early. And I think Akron gets buried. And I don't think this is too much of me being a homer to say, I think it's actually pretty possible they cover in the first half.
Yes, I mean, it is possible. Yes.
and it won't mean anything because I think Akron is slated to finish last in the MAC.
Yeah.
So like, this isn't Miami of Ohio playing Northwestern.
Right.
Like, this is a bad team.
Right.
So I think Akron's going to collect a check and then wish they didn't collect the check.
It's one of those games. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's one of those games.
Yeah. A game where the spread might be more in doubt. Illinois State goes to number 25 Iowa in Kinnick. This is a 12 p.m. kick on the Big Ten Network. Iowa's a 22.5 point favorite. I'm not sure who Cade McNamara is going to be the quarterback, so I do know who the quarterback's going to be. Can they even score 22.5 points?
Like, they're going to win because their other team's not going to score. Maybe they'll get a field goal if they're lucky, but will they score at all? Like, that's a heck of a spread for a team that cannot score in recent memory, unless they score on defense. Like, that could be a possibility with that matchup. They could score on defense, but that's a heck of a spread. I don't mean to knock them, and I understand that that's their tee up too, but they can't score, man. That's a lot of touchdowns for teams that don't get a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah, they get punt return for a touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown, a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and a field goal. There's 24 points.
That's got to be it. That's got to be it. And it's feasible, though. That's feasible. I mean, that's what that game is probably going to look like. The other thing is maybe a recovery and you get down to the 10 or the 15 and the offense finally gets in, just powers it in.
Yeah, I think the offensive line continuity is an under the radar thing for Iowa that people aren't thinking about. So Here's my bold prediction.
Mm-hmm.
They get a rushing touchdown, and Cade McNamara throws a touchdown to Luke Lachey. I
I
think
like
if he's playing. I forget it. There's a couple guys that are out for this game, and I'm trying to remember who it is. I think Lachey's playing though. So
okay.
that's my bold prediction. Cade McNamara throws a touchdown.
No, I think Iowa every year, no matter, we can talk about the stats and we can hold whoever the OC is, whether he's related to the coach or not, or we can hold them in whatever contempt we want. But that O-line continuity and that I talk about it all the time, like this institutional force that some of these teams have, these identities that are just generational identities, and that offensive line continuity, whether we're talking about the literal guys the last couple of years or just the fact that that team consistently performs well in the trenches and finds a way to win. Even if their offense is not anything fun to look at or anything dazzling, and the stat sheet may be one of the worst offenses ever, like we saw last year, they still find ways to be respectable. So,
Yep.
They could cover and they will win.
Yep, absolutely. Interesting game here. 12 o'clock on FS1. UConn going to Maryland. Maryland's a 20.5-point favorite. Mike Locksley has named the starter. Hasn't told anybody. So we don't know who's starting. Could be MJ Morris, could be Billy Edwards, could be Cameron Edge. They're 20.5-point favorites. Like, does it matter who the quarterback is in this one?
I don't think it matters who the quarterback is. Maryland's going to be interesting this year because here's the thing. They've recruited so well over several years when you're looking simply at star rankings and especially playmakers.
Mm-hmm.
They have no shortage of those playmakers in their region. They are doing well recruiting them. With Tagovailoa leaving, he's a guy who he was breaking records. He was, slinging the ball all over the field. Whenever you step down, it's a lot of confusion, head scratching. Like, what is this team going to be without that identity that they've had for several years? At the same time, they've got so many playmakers that I still expect them to find a groove one way or the other. Will it be what Tagovailoa was doing? No. But will it be formidable in some way because of those playmakers? Probably. I do think that's another coach that you're going to find, depending upon how things go towards the end of the season, that if his seat is not hot, it's warm, because with that recruiting prowess, with some of these fast starts they've gotten off to, in conference play even, and even if they're not winning in conference play, they always seem to kind of be in games early in the season, midway through the season with some powerhouses, but then still come crashing back to earth. I think with the money that program has going into it, with the playmakers they've recruited, they really want to have some kind of, definitively acceptable or incrementally better season this year, even though they've been incrementally better than they were since they came into the conference. It's kind of feels like they're hitting a wall at this point. I'm fascinated to see if they continue with that playmaking ability in any semblance, or if it's kind of like, hey, you lost Tagovailoa, you already weren't really doing great X's and O's on the field despite the recruiting, you're on the hot seat. This game, I don't think it matters. UConn's visiting them, covering the spread. This is old, not Big East, because Maryland wasn't in it, but the old Northeastern kind of battles that we've seen. UConn will have some pride down there, but UConn's had its issues too. I think it's close, but I think Maryland finds a way to cover in this game. I don't know how they'll do the rest of the season, but I think they have enough talent to cover, and they will.
Yeah, I think UConn is pretty bad, and I think Maryland. I don't have them going to a bowl game this year, but I do think they start hot, and I think part of it is I think they well overmatch UConn here, so I've got them covering here.
Yep.
So, also 12 p.m. Indiana State goes to Purdue. Big Ten on the Big Ten Network. Purdue's a 33-point favorite. I think Hudson Card throws the ball all over the yard on these guys, on the Sycamores. You agree?
Yes. I just remember the old like mixtapes you was getting in high school. It was some DJ called Sycamore, and it would just play like this old 1940s little Sycamore, and that's all I'm thinking about. But I'm also thinking about Purdue running over them, and the Boilermakers start off their season with a nice coronation too.
Yep. Tough spread to cover. I think they probably don't hit the cover, but maybe like they win by 4 touchdowns instead of 5. So
Mm-hmm.
the big game at noon is number 8 Penn State traveling to West Virginia, 12 p.m. on Fox. It's the big noon kickoff. Gus and Joel. Penn State an 8-point favorite. What's your take on this game?
I'm excited for this game because this is like, there's another element, and you probably know this too, and not everybody, I don't think, across the country is familiar with, like, when you think Northeast, you think of like, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, whatever. But there's also, like, especially in Northeastern old school football, like these Pennsylvania, Appalachian type things that go down. Like obviously West Virginia, Pittsburgh, like storied rivalry. And they're used to, people don't know this, but before Penn State joined the Big Ten, there was some talk of like a Northeastern conference with Paterno kind of pushing it. Rutgers still wanted to pretend they were like quasi Ivy League-ish and say no, and some other teams. And it was just really weird. But I like this matchup. Number one, I just like the game. I know they played last year. I like Penn State, West Virginia, just in terms of that, East Coast, but not the coast, like in a little bit. And I think it's a cool matchup. I like Penn State in the game. I just think, and this is 2 quarterbacks too last year who are kind of going toe to toe. And I think West Virginia, they both kind of hit their trajectory, but Aller just went off last year and he's just never really turned back. And I expect him to play good and be on solid footing to start the season again this year. West Virginia, I like them, and I think I think it's going to be an interesting season for them. I got a couple West Virginia buddies who went to school down there. I like the game. I think West Virginia is going to want to show up and set the tone for their season. I think Pat McAfee. Is he going and broadcasting down there? And like I think he's going to broadcast from the game or something. Fox might be there. I mean, this is a pretty big game and an interesting one. This is one of the fun games this weekend. I like Penn State. Would you say it was 7?
8-point spread.
8. I actually like them to cover, to be honest with you. I think West Virginia is going to get out there and give them a show and fight tough early in the game. But I think Penn State, just in almost every facet of the game, is going to be better. I know Penn State's got new coordinators too. And I know they got the Kansas offensive coordinator.
Kotelnicki.
And I'm familiar with Kansas last year because I had actually a contact who was involved with that offense last year, and obviously had a season much better than they had. And I know that, they've been trying to get over the hump with that Michigan-Ohio State problem with Penn State for quite a bit. And I wonder if, they changed coordinators quite a bit. I wonder if this is going to be any different for them. But you got the quarterback in place. You were good the last couple of years. You just came up against that wall that you can't get through. I expect them to cover. I expect them to win. I expect it to be a fun game, especially early on. I expect it to be electric out there in West Virginia. But I do think Penn State settles in, even if there's some jitters early because of the crowd, because of how motivated West Virginia is. I think both teams have a lot of pride this year. Both teams are going in with high expectations. I think you got that quarterback combo. You got that offense. You got that head-to-toe team. You did it last year. I know you were home, but you're going to do it again this year on the road. I like Penn State.
Yeah, defense and trenches, they travel. And I think that's, for me, I think that's the difference in this game. I'm a little concerned about the restructured secondary for Penn State. But I do I'm concerned in the fact that they've lost a lot of good guys back there over the past several years. So, and West Virginia's got some juice on offense.
No, they do.
Garrett Green is I think he's maybe the best quarterback people haven't heard of. He's a good quarterback, can run, can throw, had over 700 yards rushing a year ago, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's a good playmaker. They have a good tandem of running backs. I just think you look at what Penn State brings in the trenches, and I think that's the key in this game. I agree. I think they cover. I have them 31-21. So I think it's close, but I think Penn State ultimately covers. But I think it's going to be a great atmosphere.
I'm excited for it. And I mean, I think that's another one of the things like you and I discussed last year with conferences. I mean, you got a high flying team in the conference that you're going to chuck the ball around and do those things. Then you got this team that trenches travel, like you said, and those things are tough over the course of a football game. It still comes down to leverage and physicality, and I just like teams like that in those types of interconference matchups. So I got to go with Penn State and covering, but I think we'll have a good game throughout it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. We'll move on to a few other games that I think will be easy to talk about. Florida International goes to Indiana. It's a 3:30 kick, Big Ten Network. Indiana's a 22-point favorite. Curt Cignetti cover that in his first game
I
at
think
Indiana?
So. I think so. Yeah, I do. I mean, and I'm familiar with the Cignettis too. It's another kind of through contacts I know about, and I think they're going to want to set the tone early. It's another tee-up game for them. Coronation, they got to start building back up, and I like them.
Yeah. I think it's a big win for Curt Cignetti. UTEP at Nebraska, 3:30 p.m. on Fox. Nebraska, 27.5-point favorite. I'm going to give you a different question here. How many touchdown passes did Dylan Raiola have in this game?
4 or 5. I say he has 4. He's still young.
That's a good number.
Yeah.
I think I was going to say 3 or 4. I think they want to get him comfortable. They want him ready for Colorado next week.
Yeah.
So that's.
I want to warm him up though. That's why I think 5 is definitely pushing it, but I could see 4. I could see 4 for the young man.
Yeah.
Matt
as long as it doesn't give him too big of a head.
Yes.
But yeah, I think
I want him to get a big head for the whatever it is that we have to travel over there. Get him riding high and start chucking it all over with our secondary.
Yeah. For those, just so you guys know, we are for week 2 picks, we are having TJ and the gang from the Common Fan podcast for week 2 picks, in part because of Nebraska, Colorado. So make sure you tune in for that. This is a big game that probably nobody thinks is, but I think it really will determine the trajectory for the Northwestern Wildcats. And it is them hosting Miami of Ohio, 3:30 kick on the Big Ten Network. Miami of Ohio, one of the early favorites to win the MAC. Northwestern's a 3-point favorite. So really just for home field. And of course they are on the lake. They are in their, I think, 7,500 person makeshift stadium where they will take over that place. And tickets are extremely expensive for these games.
Right.
What's your take on this game?
Northwestern, was an interesting team last year where we manhandled them, Rutgers, week 1, and then everybody had these low expectations for them, and they came back and they really had a decent season, to say the least. It was kind of cool to see. A MAC team, I think there's only been like 1 year in the last decade or so. There's some crazy stat out there where like a MAC team upsets a Big Ten team or upsets a power, one of the top 2 conferences or something like every year. And when you're a favorite in the MAC and you're going up against a team like Northwestern, they hit their stride last year. Yeah. I don't know how much continuity Northwestern has from last year to this year. And I don't know if you have like the details on that.
Yeah, I can. Let me. They return a lot on defense. That's like their big.
This is going to be a good game. I mean,
oh yeah.
Look, a MAC favorite, against a team like Northwestern, they return a lot on defense. I think that might give them the edge. I mean, they look better as the season went on last year. I think it's almost like a toss-up type of game, which the spread would indicate. And I'm not sure I could get a great read on it one way or the other than if I say that, I think this is maybe a good chance for the MAC to come out with a victory over a Big Ten team. It's as good a chance as any, I think. And it's not to take anything away from Northwestern. It's just that you have continuity on defense. You have some areas where you struggle. And this is a MAC, a favorite who's coming in looking to set the tone for their season. It doesn't mean I'm predicting a win for them, but I think it's probably the best chances we'll see for that kind of upset. I think Northwestern squeaks it out.
Yeah, that's my feel, like a 21-17 or a 20-13 type of game, something like that. To your point about continuity, The quarterback is Gabbert. I think it's Blaine Gabbert's brother.
Mm,
And he's been good for them. Don't have any returning running backs like starting running backs. They're a lot of their guys from past couple years. I think they're backups, and they're decent. They're not. I don't think they're anything special. They bring a veteran offensive line. So I think the real key to the game is, can Northwestern's defense make enough plays and keep Miami from really moving?
right.
I the Westlot Pirates podcast, they were saying that traditionally Northwestern has really struggled in September, at least under Pat Fitzgerald,
Yeah.
but that they think that with David Braun and Zach Lujan, who's their new offensive coordinator, they're really focusing on starting strong. And I do think they will. I think their quarterback is probably going to be Mike Wright. He's a runner, like he's dual threat. So I think they'll really focus on running the ball, which with their offensive line, I think they can do. One key thing, their defensive line, all were starters. If they weren't starters at Northwestern, they were starters elsewhere. Jalen
Right.
Tate was at Wyoming. RJ Pearson was at BCU. Carmine Bastone was there a year ago. Richie Haggerty at Miami of Ohio, and SIU. So like they have a lot of starting experience. Maybe not at Northwestern.
Not together.
Yeah, and then Xander Mueller is like the rock of that defense at linebacker, and I think that defense is underrated, and I think that they're going to give the Redhawks a bit more than they can handle. And I think it's a low scoring game, but I think Northwestern pulls it out.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah. This is not going to be a low scoring game. 7:30 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Idaho takes on number 3 Oregon at Autzen Stadium. Oregon's a 43.5 point favorite. I've got them covering.
Yeah, they're going to cover. And that's another one of those fun week 1 games, and we're going to see Oregon just set off sparks as we like to see Oregon do.
Dylan Gabriel might throw 8 touchdowns in this.
Yeah.
7:30 p.m. UCLA at Hawaii. CBS. UCLA is a 14-point favorite. Any chance that UCLA forgets that they're playing a football game and thinks they're on vacation?
They might. I think this is going to. I think UCLA has like a stretch with a ton of games in a row at some point. And I think their travel schedule, going out to Hawaii early, whether they win that game or not, I think that's a tough journey to go out. And then they've got a lot of they've got some East Coast travel, and with the new adjusting in general from being a primarily West Coast team to traveling all over the country. And then you start at Hawaii. I just think I think they cover, but I think there's a risk that it kind of affects them for the rest of the season. Didn't Hawaii play already?
Yes, they did. They are 1-0. They played, let me see. They played Delaware State, who Delaware State had their flight canceled, and then they got to Hawaii. So they won 35-14 over Delaware State.
Okay. I still like UCLA, but I think, that's the kind of game where Hawaii's riding a little bit high. I don't think have what it takes to top UCLA. What's the spread again?
It's 14.
I don't know that I like UCLA to cover necessarily, but I mean, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say they cover. I think it might be closer than you might think. I'm watching UCLA after this travel and what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they probably cover too. I think something that's interesting, Hawaii, Delaware State was outmatched, but Hawaii only ran for 128 yards. They only threw for 203. I think 331 yards was their output offensively. I think UCLA's defense, they lost a lot on defense with transfers and whatnot, but I feel like they should be able to handle that attack. And I would say probably low scoring, but Garbers to Sturdivant, I think is
Mhm.
going to be that's going to be a big connection for them.
I can see
So
it.
yeah. We'll do our Big Ten after dark game, 11 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Weber State goes to Washington. Washington a 27-point favorite. Any problems there?
None.
Yeah.
None. I don't care how much
Yeah.
turnover they've had.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah. Weber State's not doing anything.
Mm-mm.
This is, I think, so the last two games, 7:30 p.m. on NBC. Fresno State goes to Michigan, number 9 Michigan. Michigan a 20 and a half point favorite. What do you think? Like, do you think Michigan covers here?
20 and a half point favorite.
Yeah.
I think they do. I think they do. I mean, what's Fresno's outlook? And I've had some rough outings against Fresno State, and so I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not in any way dissing them, but they were good last year. What were they? 9-4. They were 9-4 last
Yep.
year.
They beat Purdue.
They beat
And
Purdue last year.
yep.
Michigan, the new chapter with them now.
Yeah.
It's at Michigan. I still think they cover. I do. I think they just barely cover.
Yeah.
I think that's another one of those games where you're thinking they're not going to cover, and then it just gets overpowered towards the end of that game.
That's a good pathway that I had not thought about. I've got it. I have 34-17 as my, so I have them not covering because I think the first half is going to be, I think it's going to be rougher than people realize. And I'm very high on Michigan, by the way. So
Right.
like, this is not me like dissing.
This is not
I
LSU. Just yes, I get it.
Yeah, I have them making the playoff this year.
Right.
But I think just the time for the offensive line to gel and Alex Orji kind of getting comfortable in that offense. But I totally see a pathway for what you're saying where it's maybe 21-13, and then all of a sudden Michigan scores like 3 straight touchdowns. I think
you could have a defensive touchdown, special teams, and all of a sudden it gets out of hand late.
Yeah.
It seems to be a trend with those kind of games, and it's just gut feeling, like those kind of games where there's a formidable opponent who's definitely probably not going to come close per se, and you have a spread that's on the edge like that. I just bowed on the side of like when it gets out of control, it might get kind of a lot out of control.
Out of control.
Unless when you hold tight and you have a matchup closer, when it you can have a 10-point or a 7-point swing. These games I think tend to stay close, but then when they floodgates open, they open. It's going to be close. Your score is very plausible as well. I just think if it goes bad, it's probably going to kind of go all bad towards the end there.
Yeah, that's a good thought, Larry. And like they have guys, Donovan Edwards being the premier one, but Tyler Morris at receiver, they're going to want to get those guys involved in this game, and their speed, like there's nobody on the field that's faster than those guys.
Right.
In that game. So that's a good thought.
Yeah.
So this is the big one. This is USC I shouldn't say at LSU. Number 23 USC taking on number 13 LSU in Las Vegas. This is on Sunday. It's a 7:30 p.m. kick on ABC. LSU is a 4-point favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your thoughts on the game and your score prediction.
So, like I was saying before, I think USC wants to come out and set the tone. So does LSU. USC, I think, is facing some questions about, how are they going to fare? They have expectations. Obviously, a good team. They have expectations, but how are they going to fare now in a new conference where I've heard everything from, watch out because they're coming out swinging and they're, going to take a run at the playoff, to you guys are overrating them. The West Coast teams aren't going to be as good as you think in that long slog of the Big Ten. They both want to come out and set the tone. You had guys last year on both sides of the ball who were ridiculously good quarterbacks, and now you have these highly touted other guys both stepping up into the role. I think it's a new chapter for both, and they want to kind of hit the ground running. Despite Brian Kelly's awkward, weird accent thing that he does every now and then, I I don't get it. And now they're in like a neutral. There's a lot going on here, but
Yeah.
I I think I like LSU. Um, I just think when you go through I mean, it's not like USC doesn't play well against the SEC though, too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I just think something about LSU with their ability to their institutional trench, abilities and the fact that they're both coming. I mean, they're both coming in with new quarterbacks, stepping into
Yeah.
big shoes. And I think it's a tight game, and I think they have playmakers on both sides of the ball for both teams. I just probably side on the side of LSU when it gets down to brass tacks and nuts and bolts and helmet on helmet game of leverage in football. And I think LSU cover. I mean, what's the spread is what? It's tight.
It's 4. It's a 4-point.
I don't know that they cover. I think this is a field goal type game, and I think LSU, I give them the edge, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is decided in less than the spread.
Yeah. The one thing that concerns me with LSU, and this tips my hand in who I'm picking, I think LSU probably has the better offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my big concern with the pick I'm making. My thought process with USC is that I think while losing Caleb Williams was big, he made a lot of plays out of system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Miller Moss is going to be more targeted in the system. He doesn't have all his weapons back, but he does have Zachariah Branch. They really like a number of their receivers that are coming in. Jacoby Lane is one that I've heard a lot about. Big receiver. Jaquavius Marks comes in from Mississippi State at running back.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that really that concerns me about LSU in terms of their ability to compete in this game is their defense. Like, I know USC had a bad defense, but I think they really addressed it with transfers and with getting a new coordinator.
Right.
They got a new coordinator at LSU, but they didn't really do much with upgrading the talent.
Right.
And I look at what Tanner Mordecai did to them it's the bowl game. I know.
Yeah, but I get it.
And I don't know how much I trust Garrett Nussmeier. And, they lost Neighbors. They lost Brian Thomas. And I just, if the offense, I think I would feel much more confident in this pick if the offensive line was like they only had 2 guys come back on the O-line, but there's 4. And so for me, I'm going on a limb. I'm picking USC to win 42-31. I think it's high scoring. I don't trust Garrett Nussmeier. Like, I think he's had moments, but I'm like, I think Miller Moss can probably carve up a mediocre defense more. And I don't know how solidified USC's defense is going to be, but I do like that all their defensive line is coming back. Bear Alexander is really stepping in there. And I like that Danton Lynn is bringing in some of his UCLA guys in that secondary. So I think that's going to be a shock to LSU's system. It is on the West Coast too. So like LSU has got to do more of the travel.
That's a good point.
So that's how I settled on that. But I think out of all the games, I feel more confident about Minnesota over UNC than I do about USC, LSU. But I'm not, and part of it is I'm not convinced that USC is going to be a great team this year. But I think I've come around to, I'm not sure LSU is going to be like all that great either.
No, it makes sense. And I think if it goes the way you say with carving up and they're running away with them, against a mediocre defense, you're going to have a spread as far as what you're predicting. And I think if it's more controlled by the trenches on offense and LSU can set the tone, keep away a little bit, then it would be closer one way or the other. So I think the way the game goes is going to play into one team's hand or the other. But I think the travel too, you make a good point with going to the West Coast and already having a defense that could be on its heels. Could bode well for USC.
Yeah. What we know is it's going to be a great game. Yes. So it'll be, I'll be tuned in. This has been fun, Larry. We just picked 18 games together.
That was crazy. So, that was a lot. It's always fun with you. It's always a blast. And then even when I'm kind of losing my sight and I'm forgetting where UNC is playing and I'm mixing up USC and UNC because my ears are tired from this Newark traffic all day, I still have fun with you, Zach. I still have fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Larry, where can we find you?
Night Watch, guys. It's spelled night like the Scarlet Night Watch. Search it on YouTube. Just type Night Watch Larry K. But I am also on all major podcast platforms now. You can find me on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all the major podcast platforms. Night Watch. All my content's on YouTube, which is a whole bunch, but also just like weekly, regular Rutgers shows. I have a season preview up right now that you can listen to in audio. So if you type in Night Watch Larry K, and the only reason is because some of those guys who go out and do those medieval games on the weekends, if you type Night Watch, there's other things. Type Night Watch Larry K. You'll find my football content. And I do like to try to talk Big Ten as much as I can too, and just kind of branch out into other places. We'll have a lot this season for you with different people from around the college huddle coming on, hopefully to appear as guests and discuss matchups and things like that. And of course, you can always find me on Big Ten Football Talk with Zach. So be on the lookout, and I look forward to talking to you guys again soon.
Yeah. Well, we love having you. I think aside from JR, in fact, I know for a fact, aside from JR, you have been my most repeated guest, and awesome. it's always a joy. So I love having you on the show, and we'll get you on again soon. So we got a lot of good Rutgers games coming.
Yes. Yeah, and as the season plays out, it'll be nice to talk, and I'll have you on too to talk about Ohio State and how they, what's going on with their season on Night Watch, just to give the people a little bit more of a wide breadth of Big Ten talk. So
that'll be great. Too. Yeah, we got to do that. That'll be fun. So, well, thanks, guys. Happy football.
Yes,
we're here. So, thanks, guys, for listening. Take care. God bless.